Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the BUSHVELD Minerals Limited interim results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. Given the attendance on today's call, the company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure that the company would be most grateful. I'd now like to hand over to CEO Craig Coltman. Good morning.
And good morning to all, and welcome to the presentation covering our interim results for the 6 months ended June 2023. Let me begin on slide number 3. A few words on where we are with some of the initiatives we spoke about at a recent quarterly call. Firstly, the improvement measures implemented at Vanchem early in my tenure are starting to bear fruit. Vanchem produced 160 metric ton volume in July and very pleasing 175 in August 2023. It was a bittersweet moment because our initiative was to do 180, but we lost 2 days due to a power dip with the Eskom. Nevertheless, this represents a 63% improvement in production over the monthly average for the first 6 months of the year, with August making it the highest production month since Bushveld Minerals took over this asset in 2019. And of course, very importantly, these measures were implemented safely without injuries. Now we want to see these initiatives be maintained sustainably over a longer period, and for Vanchem to achieve this monthly rate of at least 180 mtV by the end of 2023. We maintain our revised production guidance of between 3,700 and 3,900 mtV, supported by the improved operational performance at Vanchem. In regard to financing, we continue to target the closing of the Orion transaction by December 2023. Concurrently, the Southern Point Resources deal we are working towards will put us in a much stronger financial position going forward. On that front, we have now received the approximate $8 million in working capital funds, which forms part of that transaction. The 2023 first half results for the period, we produced 1.784 metric volume ton. That's 9% higher than a year ago. We also continue to sell down inventories, resulting in just over 2,000 metric ton sold during that period. The cost per unit sold was in the order of $33 per kilogram, representing 12% decrease relative to the prior year, primarily as a result of higher sales volume and a weaker rand-dollar exchange rate. The adjusted EBITDA profit was down 34%.
Ladies and gentlemen, do bear with me just while I reconnect the company. Thank you. Just bear me one moment longer. Hi, Craig. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Lovely. We lost you for a moment, so yes, we lost you, but you're now back. So if you would would mind.
We don't have the screen in front of us, but I've got a laptop, so
yeah, that's great. If you could just continue and just tell me when to change the slides, I'll ensure investors are on the right page. We're currently on slide 3, H1 23 performance. Craig, can you hear me there? Ladies and gentlemen, just bear with me just 1 second. Just give me 1 second there, please. Thank you. Lucia, let me just request control and I can bring you back in. Thank you very much indeed.
Mark.
Craig, I can hear you, Craig. Yes, if we do lose you again, Craig, I have sent Lucia the dial-in details just as a backup if you fail again. But we're on slide 3, H1 23 performance and 22 23 update. If I could ask you to carry on, I'll let you take it from here. I'll change the slides if you can't see them in front of you.
Very good. We should be good. We just kicked over the generators and things like that. It was a scheduled load shedding. I was saying earlier, it's the only country I know. We here in South Africa we share electricity. So thank you for bearing with us. I was saying that the adjusted EBITDA was down 34% in the order of $10 million due to a lower realized price and increased cost of sales and other operating costs. In regard to cash and cash equivalents, we ended the first half of the year with $3.7 million. As mentioned, we are continuing to make progress on both the Orion restructuring and the Southern Point transaction. We're planning to complete this by the end of the year, which is the due date. Completion of these transactions will really help strengthen the company's balance sheet, reduce debt, and allow us to continue with focusing on the business. If I move on to slide 4, the group production performance. I spoke about the really good results with Vanchem. We did shut down the Vanchem kiln for 8 days in September for some much needed maintenance. When I last spoke to you, the plan was to do production in July and August and have a shutdown in September. We took a calculated risk and we continued to sweat the asset. But we had a hot spot on the kiln, and it was wise to shut it down, and we spent 8 days on relining that section of the kiln. We are waiting a full report on that, but the view from the production guys is this will enable us now to continue to Q1 2024. So we originally had a shutdown of about 3 weeks in the latter part of this year. That appears not to be necessary, so we can claw back some of that time there. We definitely need that to demonstrate ongoing credibility of sustainable production, particularly at Vanchem. We're going to be doing in the order of 120, 130 MTV in Vanchem for the month of September. But as I said, when I spoke to you previously, we were going to do a shutdown in October. That's no longer necessary, we believe, given what's been done at the kiln, and we can push through to Q1 2024. At Vanchem, July's production was 132 MTV. This was due to various things, unexpected high rainfalls, etc. We had stoppages in the plant, particularly problems around the sulfatic recovery plant. We had some barren dam issues. These have been addressed largely. We did at 215 MTV in August against a target of 200. Whilst we've made good progress with the sulfur recovery plant and performance at the barren dam, we have experienced some reliability issues with the leach processing in early September. We'll do 180 MTV for September, and then back onto the target of 200 MTV monthly run rate going forward. And then lastly, now efforts to maximize capital allocation efficiencies, reduce costs, and continue on this journey of trying to simplify our business. The company has reassessed the merits of pursuing the mining right application associated with the Brits project, and we've concluded that it's no longer going to be pursued. I mean, with the Metco having a conservative life of mine estimate in excess of 30 years, the company wants to focus on its efforts on assets we have already secured. Moving on to slide 5 on the income statement. I think the waterfall chart does a good job, refers to the factors that have impacted the adjusted EBITDA for the period. You can see that the big contributors to the $12 million odd net loss were the increased financing costs of around about $7 million. This is primarily due to the Orion production financing agreement and the Orion convertible loan note, and of course just over $3 million of other losses which relate to some fair value adjustments we need to recognize as a result of the unfortunate Mustang convertible loan notes. Slide 6 talks about the group's total costs, where the unit per sold for the half year represents in the order of $33 million. This is 12% improvement relative to the prior year. Looking at slide 7, cash flow. You'll see in the 6 months period, the group had a cash outflow from operating activities of $0.9 million compared to $8.7 million in the prior year. You'll notice the capital expenditure was almost half of that of the period of 2022. I'll get onto that a bit later at the end around risks around decreased expenditure and the impact that could have on planned maintenance going forward. Slide 8, the total net debt. Our total debt of in order of $94 million increased by $4 million compared to the previous year, primarily due to the capitalization of the interest on the Orion convertible loan. This again reinforces the importance of the continued efforts of the Southern Point Resources transaction, the funding from which will provide much needed opportunity to de-gear our balance sheet by retiring either part or the entire financing instruments. We're still working on what is the best scenario for that. Looking at slide 9 and looking at the future, the second half, before I take some questions, we've announced 2 significant financial transactions in recent months, both the Orion and the Southern Point Resources. We have a deadline of December for Orion, and we are confident we'll make significant progress on the Southern Point Resources transaction. On that note, we don't have to wait for the sale of the Vanchem, the $20-odd million. Until then, both Southern Resources and ourselves are keen to get that done ASAP. They're keen to come in and be a partner at Vanchem and start enjoying some of the fruits of that initiative. So that's first up in the sequencing of events. I mentioned that we're maintaining our production guidance of 3,700 to 3,900 for the year. Moving forward, we aim to get Vanchem to the sustainable rate of 180 MTV that I referred to earlier, and for Vametco to operate at the order of 200 MTV for at least the rest of the year. In order to improve the group's profitability, in addition to running these initiatives and resolving the financing issues, I'm going to be focusing on various cost containment initiatives in parallel to the initiatives I've already explained. I'll now pause to take questions.
That's great, Craig. Thank you very much indeed for updating investors this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated just on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while we review those questions, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Now, Craig, we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions from investors. So firstly, thank you to everybody for your engagement and for those that are submitting them as we speak. But Craig, if I could start the Q&A off maybe with a few of those that were pre-submitted. Is it time for more changes to the staff and board members?
I cannot comment on the board, but what I can say is that my engagement with the board, they are really very committed to turning this business around and making sure that we have a self-sustainable company that is future fit. I mentioned the cost saving initiatives earlier. We will be doing an organizational redesign. We're in the early stages of kicking that off. We'll be addressing some of the low-hanging fruit, and we'll identify what this organization needs in terms of an org structure to be future fit to ensure we have a self-sustaining business going forward.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's turn to the next question. We were told in 2018 that Vametco has successfully implemented its phase 2 expansion project to achieve 3,750 MTV. Why can't the plant now achieve this?
I can't comment on targets and decisions that were made by previous management, but what I can say is that Vametco, we are targeting for now a monthly steady stage production of 200 MTV and 180 MTV for Vanchem. I'll continue to focus on achieving efficiency and making sure that any production increases we achieve are sustainable and profitable. I'm very keen to grow this business and grow production throughput, but we can't just grow for the sake of growing. We've got to do it in a manner that's sustainable and profitable. Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to the third question here. What are the chances of any of the VRFB companies signing offtake agreements with Belco? And what is the forecasted production volumes for 2024?
As mentioned in the interims, we've been sending batches of electrolytes to a few international customers in an effort to qualify Belco as an approved supplier. That only happened a week or so ago, more than a half a dozen to start off with. The first batch actually arrives in Singapore tomorrow. So, we're online with what was previously shared. The qualification process involves exchanging initial samples in the order of 5 liters with corresponding analysis that can take 1 or 2 months. Some customers may qualify us immediately. Some may, after the process, request further volumes between 5 and 10,000 liters to ensure that our electrolyte meets the appropriate standard. This will take a further 2 to 3 months in the qualification process. This is because there's no global electrolyte standard. Every VRFB manufacturer has their vanadium specification, and thus Belco needs to qualify and meet with each of them. Production will be dependent next year on contracts that have been secured. As I said previously, this could take us to early December before we've got a good sense of how good our product is and whether we've got some really good customers out there. So we're on track with what I shared previously. Be able to give more reassurance in either way, whether we're up to scratch to have a Belco that can provide the needs of customers in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you there, Craig. Question here around the former CEO. Why is the former CEO still allowed to benefit by renting office space to us? It was notable in the results that he had increased the rent last year while shareholders suffered losses.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, I think the observation that the rental was over the top is a correct assumption. All I could do is make sure that I have a market-related agreement, in terms of rental, whether it's owned by whoever. What I can tell you, that with effect from August, the 1st of August, we signed a new agreement, which is a third less than the rental we were paying in July. It's closer to the 2018 numbers, and in South Africa, we run at 7.5%, 8% inflation. So the rental agreement, 1 August, I can assure you, is a third less than what we were paying previously, with no increase in 2024. And for me, that's a good enough arm's length agreement that's in the benefit of Bushveld Minerals. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. South Africa is a member of the BRICS nations. Does Craig see future opportunities for Bushveld Minerals in this massive market?
I mean, we would consider most markets, any market, as long as it makes economic sense and that we can achieve the highest premium for our products. There's no secret why we sell 50% of our products in the US today is because we get a 5% premium to other countries. So as long as it makes economic sense, we'll certainly look at that market. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any more bad financial surprises to come in the next year? I don't know what you can say within respect to forecasts and stuff, but if there's any color on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, before I address that question head on and tell you what could be coming down the line, I think it's important to understand we did release our H123 financial report and provided some update on the 6 months and an outlook for the rest of the year. Our key priorities for the year is meeting production, cost targets, and ensuring that factors that are in our control are managed effectively as possible. I don't want to labor the point around Vanchem 180, Vametco 200. We've got to keep ensuring that that's a sustainable deliverable for our own confidence and credibility within various stakeholders. We've spoken about the recovery plant and the Barren Dam. That's starting to bed down, and I'm much more comfortable with that. Don't underestimate the importance of the Orion and SPR transactions, which are very aligned in terms of timing, other than the sale of Vanchem, which I said earlier could happen much sooner. But whether it's the second half of this year or next year, there's no obvious cash losses that I'm concerned about. But there's a very likelihood of an impairment in the order of $50 million for the Mokopane mine. You know, the value that it sits in our accounting books in terms of its accounting carrying value versus what it'll be sold is very different. And that's in the order of $50 million. Now, we can only do the impairment once the sale materializes. I think the sale's in the order of $3.5 million for our 64% share of Mokopane. Whilst the sale of Vanchem itself is a lot simpler, the sale of Mokopane has a couple of other little nuances. There are minority interests, and there is some right of first refusal, etc., etc. There are a few issues that need to be resolved. Not big money in the bigger scheme of the sale, but when that sale gets concluded, and the SPR guys are dealing with those with the minority shareholders, as we speak. We've had one or two issues with them, and we're resolving a couple of issues that are not insurmountable. But when that sale happens, whether it's this year or next year, we got to recognize a $50 million impairment. It's not a cash issue, but I'm just raising it. It is an accounting issue. So hope that answers the question as direct as I can.
That's great. Thank you, Craig. Please can you tell investors why no one wants VRFBs in SA in South Africa, despite the energy challenges and the favourable conditions allowed by government regarding self-generation?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that nobody wants it. There's a very low uptake and very low demand. I think one's got to understand that VRFB customers are generally large commercial businesses. That's the customers. They don't play in the small private space. And we've had severe load shedding in South Africa for many years. So the majority of your private large commercial business have already got their energy solutions with lithium batteries and solar panels. They've had to survive. The mining industry is a little different, and there is potential demand in the mining space for these batteries, the VRFB batteries. But the mining industry, I think they're still weighing up options. I think the position at with the solar at mini grid at Vametco gives an example of where it does work. We're due to become fully operational by the end of the year on that setup. Are we still with them?
Yes.
Good. When that gets completed, we'll have 10% of Vametco's electricity will come from there. So there are examples, but they're small pockets of examples. It's also worthwhile noting that the CellSoup is the entity that has the opportunity to sell into whatever market it is, and including South Africa. But we don't have a controlling interest in CellSoup. Garnet do, and as a matter of fact, Garnet were out here last week in South Africa looking at opportunities. So let's watch this space.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's turn to the next question, Craig. And sorry to keep firing these in at you, but we did receive a number of questions. So the next one is as follows: Does Craig see Bushveld exceeding the previous reduced production guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's realistic. We are reliant on Vanchem delivering the 180 MTV. We've done 130-ish this month, but I spoke about the fact we don't have to do it's unlikely we're going to do the shutdown in October, so we can claw back a bit there. I think the guidance is as realistic today as it was when I first shared that guidance, because the plan to deliver on those guidances are starting to bear fruit. So it's as realistic as can be.
Thank you. How will Craig use the recent SRP investment? What key areas will that be focused on?
Yeah, as we've already disclosed the market, when we concluded the proposed package will provide interim working capital. We've got that already. It's an opportunity to retire some part of certain existing financing arrangements, and we're prioritizing that as we speak, including the replacing the existing group's working capital arrangement with Wogan. And of course, there's also an opportunity to evaluate the business case to recommission Vanchem's Kiln 1 as part of our capital prioritization initiative. But I've got to emphasize, it presents an opportunity to evaluate the business case. I'm not saying we're going to do Kiln 1. I think there are some quarters that want to do it anyway. I don't support that approach to investment. We need to do the proper investment appraisal first. But now I can initiate the pre-feasibility study on Kiln 1, so that when we all done and dusted and we got the funds in, we are further down the track in terms of understanding the business opportunities for Kiln 1. That's one of the expansion projects that may or may not materialize once I'm convinced or otherwise that it's an appropriate investment. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Turning to the next question, if I may, has Craig got an update on when he will be purchasing Bushveld shares?
I'd love to purchase shares ASAP, but I'm an insider, I'm in a period I can't buy shares. Very frustrating for me, for obvious reasons. We've got to conclude the Orion deal at a certain share price. To be direct, if I could use my entire proceeds of my salary that I've got since I've been the CEO since the 1st of July, I'd use it all up, but I can't do so right now. Very frustrating.
Thanks for that, Craig. Okay, let's turn to the next one. Do we have an update on Mustang Energy's position in Enerox?
We can't comment on Mustang's position. Mustang will have to provide their updates as they see fit. The latest news is that as a result of Mustang not being readmitted to the trading, by the deadline of 31 July this year, Garnet exercised its option to increase its shareholding in Cellsoup to 60% and committed to investing a further $3.25 million to support the company in the short term. Now, due to these events, alternative options are being considered by Bushveld Energy. A decision is imminent, and an announcement will be made in this regard in due course.
Thanks, Craig. Thank you. Are there any future plans to move to the main market? And if so, what would that timeline look like?
Sure. As you'll see from my previous questions, we have lots of priorities to focus on. It's consolidate and it's Orion. So this is not an immediate focus of mine.
Thank you. Bit longer, this next question. Is the delay with the Orion deal due to the possibility that the whole CLN debt will be paid off using the 25 million asset sale proceeds from SPR, specifically allocated to debt reduction, together with the proceeds from selling off our holding in Enerox / Cellcube?
I've spoken about the scenarios we're considering, whether we do pay off part entirely. We're still prioritizing that. Some of the delay that we've experienced with Orion, we needed liquidity into this business, and SPR have provided that. And there are some interdependencies between Orion and SPR. For example, when Orion convert 10% of the debt into equity at a certain share price, it's going to be SPR going to do exactly the same. So there are reasons why where we are right now, and it's taken a little bit longer than I would have liked, but we had to get the equity injection in and get a partner like SPR, and now there's some further alignment of certain deliverables and agreements before we can get them signed. Regarding Bushveld Energy, because Cellsoup, Mustang wasn't admitted on the 31st of July as the deadline requested, and I've already said we're a minority shareholder now, garnered to 60% of the business. We are spent a lot of time deliberating on the future, on Bushveld's future with the energy space, and we'll provide an update very soon, I can assure you, in terms of what scenarios are likely to be implemented.
Great, thank you. The statement in the interim presentation was that the focus now to finalise the deals was on documentation. Just how much is there, and why would it have taken 6 months?
So I shared with you in the previous question, some of the interdependencies with SPR, and we needed liquidity and aligning some of the SPR issues with Orion, in particular around the share price that the equity is going to come in at. That takes a bit of time, but there are other issues. The Orion transaction is dependent on Reserve Bank approval. It depends on shareholders' approval. We need to convene a general meeting, and I urge the directors to support that. There are a couple of binding documentation that we need to resolve still, but don't forget, it's in the best interest of Bushveld Minerals and Orion to get this deal done, and that's why I have the confidence it's going to be done, in time of the December due date. Similar with SPR, there are legal documentation that we're working on. I've alluded to us trying to accelerate the sale portion of the contract. There's no reason why that can't happen well ahead of time. And then, of course, to the extent applicable, there's shareholder requirements as well. There's South African exchange control. There's also approvals pursuant to the Competition Act. We don't see it as a problem, but all of those issues are real issues, but they're not insurmountable. That's going to cause me any concern around meeting our deadline for December.
Great, thank you very much indeed. A few more questions, if I may. Minigrid, has it turned on and in final commission yet?
I mean, the mini-grid is progressing nicely. It really is. This system was supplied by Cellsoup, filled with electrolyte, during the third quarter of this year. We're currently undergoing site acceptance testing under various operating profiles. The solar plant is really near completion, at least 90% already installed. So we're on target to become fully operational by the end of the year. But I just want to emphasize, to make sure there isn't unnecessary hype around this. The intention was, and always still is, that it's still only going to provide 10% of Vametco's electricity requirements.
Thank you. What is the timing of Highfield slag delivery in 2024? Is there a pile waiting in the wings? What is the expected cost throughput impact of the slag?
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I mean, I was talking to the guys from SPR earlier. I'm going to go visit their mines next week and their team. I don't know the answer to that. They got to put a project plan together to resurrect the old Highfield steel plant and then see what the project plan looks like. But I'm very excited and passionate about this. So we've been doing some desk numbers. It all depends on the price we pay for slag, and of course, it's got to be an arm's length agreement between ourselves and SPR, who are going to be the seller of slag. It needs to be a willing buyer, willing seller. Otherwise, there's unlikely to be the benefit that we would expect. But based on the current pricing, and I know this because I've been doing a lot of work on this space, slag runs at about a third of the vanadium price per kilogram, so around about $10-11 per kilogram. Based on that current pricing structure, and assume we do a similar deal, hopefully better. For every 1% of slag you put into the front end of the kiln, you blend it, we are going to be getting in the order of $150 million, just short of $2 million a year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot for us, $2 million a year. So 2%, you'll do just short of $4 million. We only get 50% of that, of course. The problem is slag is very high in silica content. Now, I alluded earlier, we changed our mix to 70% sodium carbonate, which is really good to counteract any significant silica. I think the jury's still out there, but But we can't just put in 5 or 10% of slag because we're going to have a problem with silica buildup on the plant. We need to do other capital configuration changes, and I don't know what that's going to cost. So the plan would be first to feed in 1 or 2% maximum, in my view, when the slag is ready, and see how the plant performs. But 1% will do, shy of $2 million. I think it would be premature to start thinking about reconfiguring plants and things like that to accommodate slag. Let's do baby steps. Let's get the Highveld steel up and running. SPR keen to do that because they've got benefit, and then we'll very, very slowly bleed a % or 2 of slag into the blend and see what the benefits are. It's high in vanadium, but of course also a high in silica content. And we don't want to get back to where we were in June, where 80% of the downtime of the kiln blockages is because of too high silica content. Granted, we were running 100% sodium sulfate then, and we got a much better mix now to counteract that. But we got to do it in piecemeal steps, one step at a time. But clearly, there's huge benefit for us for slag. So SPR know it. We all know it. They have a vested interest. We have a vested interest for them to resurrect this Highveld plant, and let's get the slag into the front end of the kiln at Vanchem as soon as possible. That's more than you were asking for, but I'm very excited about the prospect of the upside for us. Thank you.
That's great, Craig. Thank you. Couple more questions here. Brit's license, aside from the obvious contract cost, is there any reason to drop it?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things we took into account. I mean, we've been sitting on it for too long, I think. Sometimes you just got to make a decision and move on. Otherwise, it just complicates things. And I mean, we consider the costs associated with the mining right application. There's costs associated with granting the mining right, including the development cost of the mine, not cheap. And we already have a mine that works and has got a 30-year life of mine conservatively. Then you've got the consideration of the associated social labor plan commitments and costs that will immediately be triggered once you got the license. Another point worthwhile mentioning is that in the vanadium value chain, the significant value lies with the plant beneficiation rather than the mine itself. So it also allows us to focus on our core assets, and there's also no asset write-down. Those costs were previously expensed. All of those were taken into account. I absolutely believe we made the right decision.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Bit of a long question here, but I think it talks to a number of other questions that you may have received. So let me read this one in full. What level of confidence does Mr. Coltman have in the financial restructuring and the operational challenges will eventually halt what appears to be a terminal decline? I appreciate that there may be certain caveats, but can he foresee a time when Bushveld can show reliably an output and demonstrate that my investment will someday show a return? If all goes well, where does Bushveld stand in 2 years' time? Will it again be an attractive investment opportunity and proposition? Will shareholders' confidence be restored?
Sure, I could spend the whole day on this. I mean, let's start with the reliability of output. I'd like to believe we're starting to demonstrate some reliability. If you think of the Vanchem turnaround, we're there or thereabout in terms of the turnaround initiative of 180 MTV. I get it. Some corners may require more sustainable production at levels to demonstrate more credibility, and I accept that. And that's where the focus has got to be in the short and medium term.
Thanks.
But that's not enough, to get us to winning ways. It just really gets us into the path of correction. There's lots that we still need to do. We're not great, I don't believe, at planned maintenance. And when you don't have a really good planned maintenance system, it increases the risk of production volatility. That's not a quick fix. We've got to get better at managing the lead indicators. We're just putting in, I think now, appropriate lead indicators to tell us what's going on in the business at the front end of the value chain, in the at the mill, the mag separator, operating efficiencies throughout the kiln. So we need reliable lead indicator data so we can make informed decisions about the business. Then there's the cost containment measures. I could go on forever. You know, we're going to do an organizational redesign and to make sure we future fit, because we're not now in terms of supporting the business, and that's going to result in more efficiencies in the business. There are just so many. You know, we spend less than 50% of our spend, other than payroll, on suppliers via contracts. And you know, in the mining industry, the value of the spend, but whether you have got a contract in place versus not a contract, is easy 10 or 15%. So you know, if we put more suppliers on contracts and we negotiate better, we can get 15% reduction in the costs. And if you look at the spend we have, so we do about just short of 50% on contract spending. We take it from 50 to 60%. That's $1 million reduction in spend. That's a huge opportunity, but it's no good doing that unless we have proper contract management in place. So what I mean by contract management in place, if the end user who's accepting those services and signing the invoices have the skills to make sure that you're not being done in by the contractor, to make sure that you're getting your bang for buck, so that whatever the scope of a contract we agree on, whether it's raw materials or services, the 15% reduction I talk about, that the contractor actually delivers on that. So we've got to think about how we educate end users to be proper contract managers. In other words, operate the business if it was your own business. So it's easy, it's relatively easy to increase contract spend, but we don't want to do that without having proper end users trained in terms of, you know, managing contracts, what I call contract management. Huge opportunity there, you know. The capital allocation framework. I don't want people to speak the way they do and say, oh, let's use that money for that. Let's use that money for that. We've got to separate the investment decision and the financing decision. I'm really very serious about that. We've got to do a proper capital investment appraisal first. Is the investment, whether it's SIB or expansion, a dripping roast? If you have a bankable document, a bankable feasible document, the money will flow. I'll get the money easy. That's the easy part. The difficult part is making sure that you have confidence in the investment, where you're going to spend the money, and we've got to get better at that. I just want to move back to SPR. You know, if I think of the SPR guys, they run a whole lot of coal mines. They've done a couple of expansion projects, and what I'd like to do, and I've got to go see them next week, is what resources can they second to us on an ad hoc basis, as and when we need it, rather than having our own resources. I think of project management skills. You know, I've spoken about the benefit of slag, but I hope they've got good project management skills. They say they have. Let's see, because we can bring them in to assist us on an ad hoc basis if and when we do an expansion project, rather than creating a structure of project management people. You know, I can go on. There's a need for a cultural shift, where we are simple, fast, effective, that we don't overanalyze everything, that we get onto deliberate execution. That's a cultural shift. That you don't do tomorrow. I've got my ambassadors in my Exco team that are already displaying the culture that I'm looking for. I'm going to be relying on them to help me lead this change in culture, where we're actually going to go out of the operations and roll out some of these procurement contract management processes I speak of. You know, all of this, and I've just touched on some of the aspects, will get the company to a much stronger position. But what I've got to do is, it's about effort and benefit. I don't want to focus in the short term on efforts on where there's significant effort for low benefit. I've got to tease out those areas of opportunity where you get the maximum amount of benefit for the least amount of effort. Contract management is one of them. So that's a hell of a long way of answering your question. Reliability is the one thing, but that's not good enough. We need to address all these other issues, and I've got a plan. You know, I've got a plan. We have some good and indifferent things in the organization. We've got to make the good great, and I've got a plan. So I think that hopefully answers the question. If it doesn't, you can try and clarify it more in the chat box. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. If I could just please invite you just to open up the Q&A box. There's a couple more questions there that, if appropriate, if I could hand back to you. If I could just ask you to read out those questions, Craig.
Let me just move across here.
No problem at all, sir. Take your time.
Let me go and have a look here.
I think we covered a lot of the other questions that have come in, kind of duplicate in nature, but there's a few there. I don't know if there's any there that would be appropriate to respond to.
Can we assume that?
Do bear with us just one moment. Sorry, Craig, if I could just ask you to reconnect, that'd be fantastic. Gentlemen, please just do bear with us while we reconnect. They do have load shedding in South Africa, which doesn't help with connections. But
No.
Craig, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. You're right.
Lovely. Back to you, sir.
So that part can get done. We don't have to wait for that. Let me go back here. Let me drive this laptop. But the other part, there needs to be.
Sorry, Craig. I think you may have just gone back on to mute there. If I could just ask you to just refresh your browser there and just bring you back in, Craig. Just bear me 1 second. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Please do bear with us. We've just got a number of questions that Craig might want to review. Do give me 1 moment. Thank you very much indeed while we reconnect. Just requested control there. Let me just connect you back in, sir, and then hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me there, Craig?
I can hear you. Can
Lovely.
You
I can. So yeah, if I could just ask you to read out the question again and then start again on that response, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who's more frustrated here. The question was, can we assume that Southern Point will want to wait until the Orion restructure is done before proceeding with their transaction? I said, on the sale of the Vanchem, no. We're all got a vested interest to get that done as soon as possible, but there will have to be alignment on the $12.5 million equity portion, because the price at which they're going to come in is going to be the same as Orion. So that needs to be done at the same time, but not the sale. Just bear with me as I scroll down here. Is Craig enjoying the challenge of becoming CEO of BUSHVELD Minerals? Yeah. I have my days. I think if you're enjoying the job 80% of the time, you're in a good space. It's fantastic when things come together, and they do, and they are starting to come together. The answer is yes, I am enjoying it. I didn't know that the challenge was as significant as they are when I got here. Had I known that, I suppose the question is, would I have taken the job? But I'm in it now, so I'm here to win it. I'm getting some incredible support from different corners. So 8 out of 10, the answer is yes, I am enjoying it. Let me keep scrolling down here. Very small screen. Thank you for the presentation. Does Bushveld have a PR group to encourage EU to use VRFB for sustainability and environmental reasons? No, we don't. We have some skills that can do it, but we don't do that. But what I can tell you is, I met the guy called Dean Peterson. He's the guy behind the 60% shareholding in Celsius, and he is absolutely driving this vigorously. So they're much better skilled than we are to market that, and we'll tap off the potential benefit of that, given the fact that we've got a 40% stake and no controlling interest. We've put our best relationship guy. We've got one seat on the board there to try and influence things and get the best out of it. Gee, there's only one more question. From media reports, vanadium batteries in China appear to be taking off at a large scale. Do you see any interest from Chinese battery manufacturers for electrolyte? Yeah, I mean, we don't. Yeah, the answer is possibly yes, absolutely. But when I read the business model for our Belco, which does electrolyte, the focus really is on the European market. At the time of putting the business plan together for Belco, the thinking is we would sell a lot of electrolyte into Celsube. The landscape's very different now. We'd have to compete on a willing buyer, willing seller. I think it's difficult sometimes to compete with the Chinese market in terms of volumes. I've no doubt there's a huge demand there, but the scale of our plant in Belco, isn't in that sort of magnitude. So the current business plan is still to focus on the initially the European market, and there might be a lag, and we might not be producing batteries in South Africa. But what we are seeing in Namibia, for example, is some companies are bringing in VFRB batteries into Namibia. And of course, a battery comes in without the electrolyte. You provide the electrolyte afterwards. And those sort of things are the opportunities for us to provide electrolyte into those sort of batteries in Africa. And hopefully the scale will increase over time. That's that. Do you want any more questions? Yeah. Oh, another one come through. Sorry, I can see the other questions. Is the view to offload the Celsube holding or to continue the vertical integration plan? Look, I mean, I said to you that we have deliberated a lot on that. That's the energy space. We've strategized over it. I said to you that a decision is imminent, and I can assure you, when I mean imminent, I mean in weeks. And when that is made, we'll make an announcement to make sure all the Bushveld Minerals shareholders are informed accordingly. Thank you.
That's great, Craig. Thank you so much for your engagement and for taking all those questions from investors as we come up to time. Craig, I know investor feedback will be particularly important to you, and I will shortly redirect people on the call to give you their feedback. But I wondered if I could, before doing so, just ask you for a few closing comments.
Sure. Yeah, of course, man. Of course. Well, thank you for your time, firstly. I mean, these results reflect a very difficult time for the company. I'm confident that, the actions we've taken already are starting to bear fruit. We've got a long way to go. We've got more to do in the second half, achieving our priorities I've spoken about, consolidate production, the refinancing. And I've shared with you some of the other initiatives that are so important to reduce costs and drive value. When we get that right, the business will be very different going forward, and a much more leaner and efficient business. And that should then start to feed into much better financial numbers. Thank you for your time.
That's great, Craig. Thank you once again for updating investors. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Bushveld Minerals, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. Apologies for the slight disconnection, and have a very good rest of your day.